Landlords, have you heard of breathing space? A piece of legislation that stops you, as landlords, chasing tenants for rent arrears. Breathing space came into force on the 4th of May 2021. Breathing space is a respite scheme for those that are suffering with debt problems. There are two types of breathing space schemes. One is a standard breathing space moratorium. The other is a mental health crisis moratorium, both of which offer the same protection to the person within the breathing space. However, there are differences with regards to timescales. For anybody that enters a normal breathing space arrangement, the period of time that the breathing space will be in place is 60 days from the commencement. For anybody entering a mental health crisis breathing space arrangement, the length of time the arrangement will be in place is for the length of the treatment plus 30 days after. So for anybody entering into a mental health crisis breathing scheme, it could be quite a lengthy process before the breathing space arrangement ends. So landlords, how does this affect you? Why am I here today talking to you about breathing space arrangements? Let me tell you. When a person enters a breathing space arrangement, this means that every piece of debt that they had prior to the arrangement commencing is covered under the breathing space arrangement. This, landlords, includes rent that they may owe you. As I stated earlier in the video, there are two periods of time that a breathing space arrangement can be entered into. Whatever that length of time is, you as a landlord or your agent, if acting on your behalf, cannot chase the tenant for payment of the rent arrears covered under the breathing space arrangement for the length of time the arrangement remains in place. This also means that you cannot chase any joint and severally liable tenants that may be named on the tenancy agreement also. Whilst I know this may sound harsh, this is an arrangement that is formal, and as a landlord or as an agent acting on your behalf, the tenant must not be chased for any debts that are covered under the arrangement. This does not, however, mean that your tenant is not responsible for the ongoing liability for any rent that is payable after the time that the breathing space started. So for example, if your tenant entered a breathing space arrangement yesterday and owed you a total of £1,000, but their rent was due again tomorrow, let's say £500, you can chase the tenant for payment of the rent that is due tomorrow if it is not made. However, you cannot discuss with them or request for them to make any contribution or payment towards the £1,000 that is covered under the breathing space arrangement. It is important, and the government would like, for tenants to keep up their ongoing liabilities, because the breathing space arrangement is meant to be helpful to tenants and those suffering with debt problems. So therefore, if your tenant doesn't meet the ongoing obligations of paying rent whilst in the breathing space arrangement for any future rents that are due, I would strongly recommend that you notify the debt advisor that placed the tenant into the moratorium. If your tenant has been entered into a breathing space arrangement, the insolvency service will contact you directly. This will be in writing and will be an official document. It will either be sent to you via post or email. The tenant himself cannot inform you that he has entered into a breathing space arrangement without supporting evidence via a letter or an email from the insolvency service. If you're finding this video useful, please subscribe to our channel where you can find more videos on compliance in the private rented sector. A real key factor to consider, landlords, when a tenant of yours is in a breathing space arrangement is that service of Section 8 notice on rent arrears grounds 8, 10 or 11 is not allowed to be served. This is a real key factor. Should you serve a Section 8 notice on a tenant that is in a breathing space arrangement and the arrangement has not ended, the notice that you have served will be deemed null and void. Please don't fall into this trap. You also, unfortunately, cannot enforce any evictions under rent arrears grounds. So if you were lucky enough to be in possession of a possession order from the courts enforcing eviction, this will all have to wait until the breathing space arrangement has ended. You cannot enforce eviction proceedings whilst the tenant remains in the breathing space arrangement. You can, however, if needed or required, serve a Section 21 notice, which is a non-default notice not relating to rent arrears, on the tenant should the situation allow for you to do so. So landlords, just to summarise, if a tenant of yours enters into a breathing space arrangement, you must not chase the tenant for the rent arrears covered under the arrangement for the duration of the time. You must not chase any joint or severally liable tenants throughout that period. You cannot serve a Section 8 notice on your tenant in relation to rent arrears, grounds 8, 10 or 11 throughout the period. You cannot enforce an ongoing eviction if in relation to rent arrears that are covered under the breathing space arrangement. But you can, however, if the need arises and the situation warrants, serve Section 21 notice to start possession proceedings through the non-default notice. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video useful, I host a quarterly webinar where we go into full details of the variety of legislation relevant to the private rented sector. If you would like to register, please do so free by clicking the link below in the description. If you would like to learn more now, we have a playlist dedicated to compliance in the private rented sector, and you can continue to watch by clicking here now.